Sloane Whitaker's voice sliced through the office silence as she held up her phone. On it, a blurry image of herself lying in bed. "You really thought I wouldn't find out?" she said coldly. "A man like you, in my house, after I'd clearly had too much to drink." Darius Coleman didn't flinch. Seated across from her in a tailored navy suit, his hands rested quietly on the edge of the desk. His military stillness gave nothing away, not anger, not fear. "You were barely standing," he said, voice calm but firm. "I took you home. That's all." Sloane scoffed. "Spare me the good guy routine. You think anyone's going to believe you over me?" The implication hung heavy in the room. Loaded, racial, deliberate. Darius met her stare without blinking. "Ms. Whitaker," he said slowly, "are you sure you want to do this?" She leaned forward. "I'm considering filing a formal complaint. Sexual misconduct. It's your word against mine." Seconds passed. Then Darius spoke again, softer. "This time, what if I told you? I have evidence." Sloane's smile faltered. Darius Coleman had always played the long game. He was not the loudest in the room, never the first to speak in meetings, but when he did, people listened. Or at least, they used to. Before his name began to spread through hushed whispers and darting glances in the hallway 5 years earlier. He joined Whitaker Financial as a senior data analyst. His resume was solid: military service, a master's degree in information systems, and a flawless record at his previous job. But what made him exceptional was not on paper. It was in how he carried himself. Dignified, precise, controlled, like a man who had already survived worse, because he had. Darius was 12 when his mother died. No aunts, no uncles. Just the foster system and a rotation of homes that taught him two things: document everything and trust no one. By the time he aged out at 18, he had already learned how to read a room faster than most people could open their mouths. He enlisted the next week. 4 years in the Army taught him discipline, but it was college that gave him purpose. He studied systems, how they functioned, where they failed, and how to quietly protect himself within them. That mindset never left him, even when he became a father to Naomi, a bright-eyed baby girl with her mother's smile and his stubborn spirit. Naomi was the reason he worked late, studied harder, and bit his tongue more times than he could count, because at Whitaker Financial, things were never as merit-based as they appeared. Sloane Whitaker, the founder's daughter turned CEO, was poised, articulate, and well-connected. On paper, she championed diversity and inclusion. But in the conference room, her eyes always glazed over when Darius spoke. She nodded at his analysis, but praised inferior reports from others. She double-checked his data, yet signed off on mediocre work from colleagues who happened to look more like her. It was not obvious. Not enough for an HR complaint. But it was constant, the accidental scheduling of important client meetings at all-white country clubs. The subtle surprise in her voice when he mentioned Naomi was at the top of her class. The way she always called on him last, if at all. Darius noticed everything. He just chose not to react. Yet he focused on the work, on Naomi's bedtime stories, on building a future where she would never have to shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations. But that night, the company party shifted everything. Sloane had been drinking heavily, laughing too loud, slurring her words by the end of the evening. Darius had found her crying alone in the restroom hallway, heels in hand, mascara smudged. No one else had stayed behind. He could have left. Many would have. But he did what he was raised to do. He helped. He drove her home, walked her to her door, made sure she was safe. That was it. And now, somehow, she had turned that moment of decency into a weapon. The next morning, he had returned to work as usual. He reviewed numbers, submitted reports, and kept his head down. But by noon, he could feel it. Something had shifted. Colleagues stopped making eye contact. Conversations fell silent when he entered the break room. One intern, who had always been friendly, visibly stepped away from him at the coffee machine. Then, Jennifer Rayner from HR showed up at his cubicle. "Darius," she said, eyes darting behind her. "Can we talk privately?" In the glass-walled HR office, Sloane was already seated. Her lips curled in a controlled smile, the picture of corporate concern. Two attorneys flanked her, both unfamiliar, both unreadable. Jennifer looked uneasy. "There has been a concern raised about your behavior after the company event." Darius kept his voice even. "What kind of concern?" Sloane answered for her. "I was vulnerable, and you were in my home. Alone. It created a situation that could be perceived as inappropriate. He stared at her, absorbing every word. "There are photos," she added, pushing her phone forward. "You in my home." "Me?" Clearly disoriented. Darius looked at the image. Sloane lying in bed, makeup smeared, hair undone. It was meant to look suggestive, manipulative, but he knew when it was taken he had not even been there. "Who took this?" he asked calmly. "I did," she replied, after I realized what had happened. He made a mental note. First lie. The security camera in her building would show he left hours earlier. "Darius," Jennifer said gently, "while this is under review, we are placing you on a temporary suspension, unpaid." He nodded, not because he agreed, but because he had expected this. On his way out, no one spoke to him. No one looked up. The company that once praised his efficiency now treated him like a ghost. That evening, Naomi sat at the kitchen table working through her math problems. She glanced up at him with innocent concern. "Daddy, are you okay?" He managed to smile. "Yes, baby girl. Just a little problem at work." She looked at him, wise beyond her years. "You always say good people win in the end. Is that still true?" He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Yes," he said softly. "But sometimes good people have to fight first." And Darius Coleman had been preparing for this fight his entire life. Darius did not go to just any lawyer. He had made that mistake once, years ago, when a colleague stole his work and got promoted for it. Back then, the lawyer had smiled politely, scribbled a few notes, and said, "It is your word against theirs." That would not happen again this time. He called Ariana Blake, civil rights attorney, known for dismantling corporate reputations brick by brick. She did not just win lawsuits, she exposed systems. Her name made executives nervous. Her presence in a courtroom made headlines. She answered on the second ring. "This is Ariana." "Ms. Blake, my name is Darius Coleman. Layla Tran told me to call you. She said you might be able to help." The other end of the line went quiet. "Layla mentioned you last month," Ariana said. "She said you had been tracking certain patterns inside Whitaker Financial. Patterns worth discussing." "I have more than patterns," Darius said quietly. "I have proof." They met the next morning at her office. No polished wood conference room, no pretentious artwork. Just a quiet space, lined with case files and a desk with 2 chairs. Darius sat down, opened his laptop, and slid it toward her. What appeared on the screen made Ariana sit forward. Spreadsheets, names, dates, performance ratings of every employee of color at the firm for the past 3 years, color-coded and cross-compared to white colleagues with equal or lower qualifications. Every instance where minority staff were denied promotions. Every time their evaluations were marked needs improvement despite exceeding benchmarks. "This is extensive," Ariana said slowly. "How long have you been compiling this?" 2.5 years, Darius replied. "Since the first time my report was flagged for tone, while another analyst's error-ridden model was praised as innovative." He clicked another folder. Emails, internal chat messages, private conversations between executives discussing how to maintain professionalism without letting diversity hires lower standards. One message from the head of talent strategy. Read, "I'm all for inclusion, but we cannot confuse progress with compromise." Ariana kept scrolling. Then she stopped. "What is this?" She asked. A 23-minute audio recording was labeled Executive Roundtable. March 9 inches. The first 30 seconds. Sloane Whitaker's voice was unmistakable. "You give some of them too much freedom, and suddenly they think they are owed a corner office. No one gave me anything. I built my way up. They can too." Ariana blinked. "How did you get access to this?" Darius looked at her. "I worked in IT before I was promoted to senior analyst. I had access. Then I started noticing the way meetings were happening behind closed doors, so I set up monitoring protocols. Nothing illegal, just passive. I never hacked anything." Ariana leaned back slowly. "This is not just an employment issue," she said. "This is a pattern of institutional bias." Darius said nothing. Instead, he opened one last file. It contained transcribed voicemails, phone recordings, and security footage timestamps. One message from Sloane to a fellow executive, Vivian Cross, said it all. "These kinds of men, they do not know their place. And if we are not careful, one of them ends up in leadership just to prove a point." Ariana shut the laptop gently. Darius, she said, her tone serious now. The Justice Department has a task force investigating racial discrimination in Fortune 500 companies. I know people on that team. If this is as airtight as it looks, your file might be the last piece they are waiting for. For a moment, Darius said nothing. Then he nodded. Good, because this is bigger than me now. That night, Naomi curled up on the couch with her history book. She was working on a report about civil rights leaders and what they stood for. Halfway through her reading, she looked up at him. Dad, can I ask something? Of course. Why do some people think they are better than others? Just because of skin color? Darius froze, not because he did not have an answer, but because he had heard that same question once before. He had asked it to a social worker when he was 13. She had smiled sadly and said, "Some people just forget we are all made of the same dust." He took a breath. Some people, he said slowly, have never had to prove themselves, so they grow up thinking they deserve more. Naomi's eyes narrowed. That's not fair. No, he said. It is not. That is why we fight. Naomi smiled, closed her book, and rested her head on his arm that he stared at the ceiling for a long time after she fell asleep, because now the fight had changed. It was no longer about clearing his name. It was about reshaping the system that tried to bury him, and the one his daughter would one day walk into. Sloane Whitaker believed she had won by Friday morning. She was back to her confident, commanding self, laughing in phone calls, smiling in board meetings, and walking through the halls like she had just closed $1 billion deal. To her, Darius Coleman was already forgotten. Just another small problem handled swiftly. She called Vivian Cross, a close friend and director of another branch. I dealt with him, Sloane said, swirling her coffee, before he became a real liability. Vivian chuckled. You mean before? He played the race card and made you look bad. Exactly, Sloane replied. A single black man against a respected white woman? Please, I know how this works. What she did not know, what she could never imagine, was that Darius had been listening the entire time. Months earlier, Darius had quietly installed a system that logged internal conversations on company devices. Not illegal, not hacking, just a tool he developed during his time in IT to protect himself in a workplace that had never fully accepted him. Every email, every chat, every phone call from a work device, saved, labeled, time-stamped, and now every arrogant word Sloane spoke was being recorded. The problem with people like him, Sloane said during one call, is they grow up thinking they deserve the same treatment as people who actually built something. That's not how the world works. That recording alone was enough to shake a courtroom. But there was more. A group chat between executives joking about diversity hires being too sensitive to an email from HR discussing how to raise the performance bar right after 2 employees of color were passed over for promotions, that a deleted memo suggesting that cultural differences may explain lower performance in certain demographics. Darius did not need to say anything. He just kept collecting. Every file he saved was a piece of a bigger truth. A truth he had spent years preparing to reveal. At night, he sat at his kitchen table while Naomi did her homework beside him. He watched her frown at her math problems, her tongue sticking out slightly as she focused. So full of life, so full of dreams, she had no idea the world she would grow into. And that was why he could not stop. This was never just about him. It was about her, about every child who would grow up being told to work twice as hard for half the credit. About every quiet, intelligent person of color sitting in the back of the room, watching mediocre men rise ahead of them. He would not let that system touch her future, not if he could help it. That weekend, Ariana Blake called him again. I spoke to someone inside the Justice Department, she said. They are reviewing the material you gave me. There's already an open file on Whitaker Financial. Darius nodded. What does that mean? It means they were already looking. Your evidence may be exactly what they needed to move forward. She paused. They want to schedule a formal meeting with you. A full interview. Possibly this week. Darius looked down at Naomi, who had fallen asleep on the couch with a book resting on her chest. They can talk to me anytime, he said. Ariana exhaled. Good. Because if this goes the way I think it will, we are not just talking about getting your job back. We are talking about exposing an entire company. That night, while Sloane dined at the city's most expensive restaurant, laughing with Vivian over wine and dessert, Darius sat with his laptop, Organizing more files that IT was not revenge, he felt that IT was focus. He reviewed audio logs from the last 6 months, Sloan joking about her diversity points, executives mocking a black intern's attitude, comments about keeping HR complaints from spinning into race narratives. Every time they thought they were being clever, they had left fingerprints. Darius was not angry anymore, but he was ready. Before shutting down for the night, he sent one last secure file to Ariana. The subject line read, "For the DOJ, Phase 1 complete."
Monday began like any other for Sloan Whitaker. She walked into the office wearing her signature cream blazer and red bottom heels, sipping her imported coffee, and reminding her assistant to hold all calls until after her executive meeting. She
had no idea her world was about to collapse. 9:02 a.m. There was a knock on her door. Jennifer Rayner from HR entered without waiting for permission. Her face was pale, lips tight. Behind her stood 2 men in dark suits, each holding government ID badges, and behind them was Edward Langston, the company's CEO. The color drained from Sloan's face. "Ms. Whitaker," said the taller of the 2 agents, stepping forward, "I am Special Agent Reed with the Department of Justice. We would like to ask you a few questions about your management practices." Sloan blinked. I am sorry. What is this about?" Edward Langston stepped inside and shut the door. He looked like he had not slept in days. "It is about racial discrimination," he said flatly, "and a federal investigation. We have a very serious problem." Before Sloan could respond, Agent Reed placed a tablet on the table and tapped the screen as Sloan's own voice echoed through the room. The problem with people like him is that they grow up thinking they deserve the same treatment as people who have actually built something in life. Her body went rigid. "That was taken out of context," she said quickly. "I was referring to..." Agent Reed played another clip. "A single black man against a respected white woman. The courts may be more sensitive these days, but credibility still matters." Jennifer swallowed hard. Even Langston took a step back. "Sloan," he said quietly, "please tell me you did not say that." Look, this is political. That recording could be edited." Another clip played, this time from a call with Vivian Cross. "You dealt with him before he played the race card. Smart. Those cases can drag on for years." Sloan's mouth opened, but no words came. Agent Reed slid a folder across the desk. "These are transcripts of your phone calls over the last 6 months, all collected under a court-approved monitoring warrant. We also have internal emails, HR system access, logs, and security footage from the night you claimed Mr. Coleman acted inappropriately." At the bottom of the folder was a photo, the same one Sloan had presented to HR as proof that Darius had invaded her privacy. Agent Reed tapped the timestamp. This image was taken nearly 3 hours after Mr. Coleman had already left your residence. That is confirmed by building security footage and car GPS records. Sloan's knees nearly buckled. I can explain." Edward Langston's face twisted in disbelief. "Explain," he said. "Explain how you fabricated an accusation against an innocent man, or how you accessed the HR system to lower employee evaluations based on race. Do you understand what you have done?" Sloan looked around the room. No one was on her side now. Even Jennifer, who had once tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, stood motionless, ashamed. "You have compromised this company," Langston said, his voice rising now. "You have exposed us to federal charges, destroyed years of goodwill, and weaponized your position to ruin someone's life." Sloan's voice cracked. He was building a case against me. He set me up." "No," Agent Reed said firmly. "He protected himself and documented the truth. Every move you made, every word you said, is backed by evidence." He stepped forward. "This is not just an HR issue anymore. This is criminal. Obstruction, falsification, discrimination." Langston looked down at Sloan. "You are done here. Effective immediately. But you are fired, Sloan." 2 security guards entered quietly, waiting at the door. "You may leave with them now," Langston said coldly. "Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch another company device. We will be cooperating fully with the Department of Justice." As she stood, trembling, grabbing her bag with shaking hands, she turned to Agent Reed one last time. He did this. Darius Coleman did this to me." "No," Agent Reed replied. "You did this to yourself." And with that, Sloan Whitaker was escorted out of the very company she once ruled, humiliated, exposed, and powerless. But for Darius Coleman, this was only the beginning. The sun was setting as Darius sat on the porch of their small home. Naomi was next to him, her feet tucked beneath her as she colored in a notebook. The evening breeze was soft, peaceful. For the first time in weeks, there was no weight pressing on his chest. His phone buzzed gently. It was a news alert. Whitaker Financial under federal investigation for systemic discrimination, CEO issues. Public apology. He read the headline quietly, then placed the phone face down beside him. He was not angry anymore. Not even satisfied. Just still that he had not fought to destroy Sloan. He had fought to protect the truth. And his daughter, behind him, the TV played in the living room. A news anchor was reading from a press release. Following a Department of Justice investigation, Whitaker Financial has agreed to a full internal audit and third-party oversight. Multiple executives, including Sloan Whitaker, have been terminated. Civil rights attorney Ariana Blake will serve as independent advisor during the company's reform process. Darius looked up at the sky, the same sky his mother used to stare at when things got hard. He remembered her voice. Just because they try to silence you doesn't mean your truth disappears. He smiled. She had been right. Inside his laptop pinged. A message from Ariana. We did it. DOJ is moving forward. They want you on the advisory board for equity reform. I told them you're the most prepared person I've ever worked with. Let me know. Darius read the message twice. Then once more. Not because he was unsure, but because it felt like something he had waited his entire life to hear. That he did not reply yet. Instead, he turned to Naomi. She had stopped coloring and was watching him closely. Are you okay, Daddy? She asked softly. He nodded. Yes, I think I finally am. Naomi tilted her head. You always say good people win in the end. He smiled. I believe you now, she said. Those 5 words filled his chest in a way nothing else could. This was not about headlines or victory. It was about integrity, about proving that even in a world stacked against you, quiet strength could carry more power than anger ever could. And now, the system that tried to crush him would have to face the truth he had carefully collected, not with rage, but with evidence, with discipline, with dignity. Naomi leaned her head on his arm. He kissed her forehead. Will you go back to your job? She asked. Darius looked out toward the sky again. Maybe, he said. But if I do, it'll be to make sure things change. Not just for me, but for everyone who comes after. She smiled. Like a superhero? He laughed softly. Something like that. They sat in silence for a moment longer. No shouting. No noise. Just the sound of justice doing its quiet work. Finally, in the right direction. 6 months later, Darius Coleman walked through the marble halls of a different building. No cubicles. No whispered gossip. This time, he was not an employee, he was an advisor at the request of the Department of Justice. He now worked with federal investigators to review internal systems across major corporations, helping uncover racial bias buried deep within performance data, promotion paths, and HR records. He had turned his pain into a blueprint, and now he was helping others protect themselves before it was too late. Across the country, news outlets continued to run updates on the Whitaker scandal. Sloan's photo, once framed proudly in company brochures, now flashed across TV screens with the words, "Corporate executive behind discrimination scandal faces federal charges." Her name had become a cautionary tale, that a symbol of what happens when unchecked power meets someone smart enough and patient enough to document everything. In a quiet cafe not far from his daughter's school, Darius sipped black coffee and reviewed another report, a case file from a different firm, another employee, another pattern, another battle worth fighting. Outside the window, Naomi waited by the school gate, waving as she saw him arrive. He smiled, stood, and tucked the file into his bag. Justice, he had learned, was not loud. It was steady, relentless, and sometimes it took years. But in the end, sometimes the best way to win is to let them build their own trap and wait.